This is the corporate citizen that this, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr. Chair, I have to say, when I was listening to this debate tonight, there's a very straightforward question for the members of the opposition. Very straightforward question for the members of the opposition. Where were they in 2001? Where was Trevor Mallard then with his anger and his upset? Where was Phil Goff? Why weren't they winding up Helen Clark and saying, don't you dare, Prime Minister, don't you dare support that horrible convention centre deal with the Sky City Casino? Where were they then? They didn't say a word. And with that knowledge, we all know that what they've been getting themselves wound up tonight means absolutely nothing. It's pure rubbish politics. I didn't care 10 years ago. Now I'm on the other side of the House. I care passionately and deeply, Mr. Chair. That's what they're saying. Trevor Mallard in 2001...
Order. The member cannot say that. These are debating points, and the member can... No, the member cannot use the word "you're a liar."
That's right.
And order. I'm on my feet. And there's a standing order, 42, Speaker's ruling on page 42, that says that you cannot call someone a liar, and I'll ask the member to desist from now on. Now, Honourable Steve...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
I am the ruler in these matters, and there'll be no further discussion. Honourable
Mr. Chairman, you indicated what the Minister said was a debating point. It is a matter of the record of this House how I voted on this bill.
That's not a point of order. Order. The point I raised was it used an unparliamentary language, and that's what I asked you to desist from. Now, the Honourable Stephen Joyce.
The matter of fact is that the Labor Party was in government in 2001 when a deal was done to build a convention centre in return for additional pokie machines in Auckland with Sky City, and Trevor Mallard was silent. I did not see any protests from Trevor Mallard. I did not see him crossing the floor. I did not see him doing anything to indicate concern about this, and that's why everybody should ignore his false anger tonight. He's a specialist in false anger, just like his friend Mr Goff. Where was Mr Goff in 2001 when Mark Burton and Helen Clark were getting positively excited and passionate about the new convention centre in Auckland? They were nowhere, Mr Chair, because they were not at all concerned at that point, but miraculously, when they're on the other side of the House, they are concerned. And where were the Greens? Where were the cardboard cutout of the gambling machines in 2001, Greens? Where were you then, the Greens? You were nowhere. You were not part of it in 2000. You were quiet as church mice sitting...
Order. Don't bring me into it.
Sorry. The Greens were quiet as church mice, sitting quietly. Auntie Helen said it was all okay. We won't be concerned about this. We'll get something back for this. That's where the Greens were in 2001. So, Mr Chair, we should ignore all their protestations tonight because they had none when it counted, when they were supporting a government. The Labor Party and the Greens were quiet. And that's why this should be ignored, Mr Chair. That's why all this false outrage, all this excitement, all this standing up to claim the speaking slot is all a pantomime. It's a pantomime, and it's time it was called tonight. It's a pantomime from the opposition. They are lions in opposition. They are absolute lambs when they're in government. And tonight we've seen it. Tonight we've had the proof, Mr Speaker. And not only that, they were poor negotiators. They've been having the government on, saying the government was taken for a ride. Well, in 2001, the deal was for the same number of pokie machines and a convention centre 1/4 of the size. That's where they were at in 2001. It was the most appalling deal that this government on the Labor Party saw. Doesn't matter. You were the government, Trevor. Trevor was in the government. You were in the government at the time. Where was the law? Where was the law? Why didn't you run the law, Trevor? Why didn't Labor put through a law to stop it happening? That's the question I have for you, Mr Mallard. And you didn't do that because you didn't object then. You were quite happy then, and today it's suddenly the worst thing in the world. Well, Trevor, I have no respect for you for making those comments. No respect for you at all, because it's the most appalling thing to oppose something so vehemently now when you actually allowed it to occur in 2001. It's sanctimonious craptrap. Sanctimonious craptrap, Mr Chair, and it's time this debate was brought to a conclusion. Because the other thing, Mr Chair, is the other chair...
Order. Calm down. Now, the member, once again, Speaker's rulings on page 42, you cannot say tell the truth. And I'll ask the member again not to use that unparliamentary language in the House. Honourable Stephen Joyce. Annie's Galloway.
The Minister himself just used the phrase tell the truth, so I ask you to call him to order as well.
Okay, well, if that's the case, I didn't pick that up, but certainly, look, order. When I'm on my feet, it's quiet. Now, look, standing Speaker's rulings on page 42 are very clear. You can't use unparliamentary language, and I ask you to respect those. This is a robust debate. Happy with that. Everyone's going to get their say in this. They've had a big say so far, but let's keep it seemly and keep the language correct. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, so there are some very straightforward questions for the opposition to answer. Why is it such a bad thing now when it wasn't back then? For the Greens, why are the Greens running a debate now when they weren't back then? And no, you can't hide behind you can't hide behind... Where was the law, Grant Robertson? When you were in Helen Clark's office, where was the law saying that we won't be doing this? Where was that then? And you didn't have one. You didn't change the law to stop it happening. You actually went and supported it. Mr Chair, and worse than that, Mr Chair, worse than that, they not only didn't stop it, they went out and celebrated it. Mark Burton went to the opening as the Minister of Tourism. He celebrated the success. He said what a wonderful thing it was. Helen Clark said what a wonderful thing it was to see this investment by Sky City in the convention infrastructure in New Zealand. And Grant Robertson hates it because conveniently he has now become an opponent. Grant Robertson has become an opponent to Sky City, which is very convenient, given that half the caucus was in the hospitality box at Sky City saying that everything was okay. But he is now an opponent, and that's why I can't respect you in this debate, Mr Robertson, because in 2003, working in...
Mr Chair, I appreciate the Minister is quite emotional about all this, but on several occasions he has said he has no respect for you, and I find that to be abominable in this House.
I'm listening very carefully to those points, and I will rule on them appropriately at the time. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
And that's why, Mr Chair, you can't have the respect for these people in this debate, because in 2001 and 2003, this party to my left was not only quiet, they were in favour of exactly this sort of deal. They did speeches on it, they did absolute speeches, and here he is now, Grant Robertson, now absolutely denying, he's a denial, he's a Sky City Convention Centre denier. That's the reality of where Grant Robertson is today. So, Mr Chair, over the course of this debate, we've had incredibly small amounts of anything that's actually related to the bill. All we've had is a rerunning of all the hypocrisy between the Labor Party and the Greens and everybody that has opposed this thing, that were quiet in 2001 and quiet in 2003.
Sir. Point of order, sir. Point of order, sir.
There's a point of order, Materia Ture.
I take offence at the description of the Green Party as hypocrites made by the Minister when we voted against the gambling bill.
Order. I've heard the point you've made. The Minister didn't use the word hypocrite. He said the hypocrisy. And that's a word that has been accepted. A point you make, I appreciate. The Minister has 3 minutes remaining.
And just to refresh Mr Robertson's memory, Mr Chair, this is the lines that Mark Burton used in 2001.
Point of order, Denise Roach.
Point that the Minister was factually incorrect about.
No, that's not a point of order. All you're doing is interrupting the flow of the debate. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Greens feeling their silence from 2001, I feel. And Mr Speaker, here's what Mark Burton said.
Order. Now, I know what's going to happen. The Minister, no one can comment on a ruling that I've made. So let's carry on in a seemly manner without getting into this, these sideshows that we're having. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
And Mark Burton, Mr. Chair, said in 2001, Sky City's $140 million investment into this facility will give it the capacity to compete for a whole new range of prestige events. Doesn't sound like somebody opposing it to me. He went on to say the potential gains from this are widespread. Not only for... Oh, it's a whole different deal. This is a National Party deal. It's against the Labour Party deal. Oh, of course. How silly of me. This is the hypocrisy that we're talking about. This is what he said. The potential gains from this...
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallett.
Mr. Chairman, I know you've ruled on this matter very recently. What he has done then is label a party as hypocrites.
No.
And, sir,
no,
he said about...
I hear what the... Order. Order. He said the hypocrisy of the policies. He didn't say anyone was a hypocrite, and that is an acceptable use of that phrase. And I've already ruled on that this evening. Now, the Honourable Stephen Joyce has the call. 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as I said, Mr. Burton's comments, the Honourable Mark Burton, Minister of Tourism for a Labour government at the time, said the potential gains from this are widespread, not only for Sky City, but for the Auckland City and region, the tourism industry and the whole of New Zealand. Unfortunately, Trevor Mallard wasn't around at the time. He wasn't around at the time. I didn't hear this in 2001, Trevor. I didn't hear what I'm hearing now. Helen Clark on 2001. The saintly Helen Clark, Prime Minister, in Auckland, Sky City has pumped $140 million into its new convention centre. And Auckland City has rebranded and upgraded its convention facilities. It has been pleasing to see continuing investment in the quality of our tourism infrastructure. Labor once again are the yeah party, Mr. Chair. They're not debating any of the points tonight. They're trying to deny their history, and that's fine. They can do that, but the New Zealand public sees it for what it is.
I'm going to call...